Hey everyone, so this is Unit 2, Lesson 6, and today's lesson is going to focus on how specialization led to trade and markets. So, in the last lesson, we really looked at specialization and how it led to new jobs being created, and then how these jobs helped change society. Today, we're going to look at how these jobs and trading led to new ways that people in these societies received what they needed, and we're going to look at how they got this through trade and through markets. So, just to recap, people began to specialize or focus on one skill or task, and that the skill or task is something that they mastered and it helped them create new jobs within society. And we know that people began to trade or barter with one another to have the items they wanted or needed that they didn't grow or make themselves. So, thinking about that farmer and weaver scenario where the farmer grows the food, the weaver is going to create the fabric and different textiles, and then they'll trade with one another. So, just a little vocab, trade is when you exchange one thing for something else. It can include money. And then barter means to exchange goods or services without using money. So, goods are the physical items, services are things that people can do for one another. But this is trading them and exchanging, but without using some kind of money or some kind of money equivalent. So we know that they're trading for these different things with one another, but they also began to trade because people, while they had the fertile land to farm, they didn't have all of the resources that they needed in every area within Mesopotamia. So they began to trade with other city states within Mesopotamia that had different resources. Because remember, Mesopotamia has a lot of different geographical features. You have the mountains, you have the river area, you have deserts. So different people living in different areas are going to have different resources. So they're going to trade with one another in order to get these different things. So, for example, the people in southern Mesopotamia who are living along the rivers and within the river valleys are going to trade fish, mud bricks, and crops for stone, wood, and metals with people who lived in the mountain regions of northern Mesopotamia. So, the river area has these different items and different resources, so they're going to trade with the mountain regions and the city states there who have different items from the mountains. And we talked about how the common class was made up of people who created items for others that they could buy or trade for. So these are going to be our craftspeople. They're going to be our laborers. They're going to be our farmers, the people who make or grow different things, and the merchants who sell them. And these different people who were trading these items were having to travel from place to place and go from person to person. And they would have to go from one house to another in order to trade all of the different things that they needed and travel really far distances just to get some of these resources. Eventually, they discovered that if people settled in one area who were trading and set up one spot, then they could reach more people by having everyone come to them. This is the idea of a market. So, markets exist whenever there is an exchange of physical goods or services. And then the people of Mesopotamia are actually going to create trade centers. So, they're creating actual physical markets, physical marketplaces to trade from. So, just so we have a visual to help us know what they are, if you've ever seen the Disney movie Aladdin, then you've actually kind of seen how these markets would have worked. So if you think about Aladdin and you think about when Jasmine escapes the palace and she's going through the city, she's walking through a market. She's seeing all of these different tents, all of these different vendors that are set up and selling the different items that they grow or make. So for example, in this picture, this man is holding some kind of form of pottery that he has made and is trying to sell. Or the vendor right beside him has food. So this is an example of what these markets looked like. Or just a quick present day market. Think of flea markets or farmers markets. You can go to a farmers market here in Frankfurt or in different areas, and they have tents set up where different people have tables with all of the things that they have made or grown and they're trying to sell. So this is what these markets were like. There are tents with people and vendors with their different goods. So they have the food that they grew or the different items that they've created. This is what Mesopotamia started to make. These different city-states, the people who were trading and walking around from place to place trying to trade decided to come together and set up these markets where everyone could trade in one spot. And they soon realized that if they traded with people from other places outside of Mesopotamia, that they could get even more and different products, because just like the different areas within Mesopotamia had different resources, there's going to be even more resources outside of the region completely. So people from Africa or from India, from even as far as China or going up into Europe, all of these different areas have different geographies, have different climates, so they have different resources that are available to the people. So if they trade with all of these people from other areas, they could get even more things than what they have just in Mesopotamia. And in order to trade with all of these different people, the way that they transported goods primarily through two ways. The first is going to be through caravans. So caravans are just groups of people who are walking or traveling by land to trade. So they can be by foot or with animals. And then the animals can either have like carts or some way to help move the items or baskets, but it's them moving by land with these groups of people. And then we also have boats. So they would use boats to go along the rivers, or they would use the different seas and things depending on where they were going to move the goods from place to place. And where they had such an increase in the movement of goods by the water, city-states on the rivers, like in Sumer, built docks and shipyards for these trade boats to stop at. So ships from all different regions could stop and trade their goods. They could just pull up to the dock and unload what they had. So they could easily unload large amounts of things at one time. So a merchant might have clothing and jewelry and food. They might have precious metals and different stones or tools. All of these different things and more. The merchants could just pull their boats up to the docks and unload, or they could use the caravans that travel to these marketplaces and set up an area and just sell in these markets. And in order to trade or purchase goods, people would basically use two things. They would use the barter system, where they would trade one item for another, or they started to invent different placeholders that would have value. So think of like present day money. They would use similar things. So they would create tokens out of clay or gold or other metals that would be kind of have a value to it, and then you could trade or barter using those. So they also created cuneiform in Mesopotamia, and this is a writing system that they created that uses wedge shapes and other symbols to represent words. You're going to learn about cuneiform in the future, but this is just a quick little preview because they used this writing within the marketplaces as well. They used it to write down contracts to make sure that different trading systems between people would actually happen, or to show proof that this actually happened or someone paid for something. That way you can't say someone stole something, or you could see if someone really did steal an item, or just to keep records of who is selling what, who is involved in the markets, all of these things. So cuneiform really helped them keep records of their markets. So as markets in these city-states grew, the overall city-state's economy is going to grow. So this is going to be their money, their wealth. All of this is going to grow because more items and things are being brought into the area. So there's going to be an increase in wealth overall. There's going to be richer things in the area, so it's going to be a wealthier area. And it's also going to grow because people had to pay taxes in order to trade. So this means that the people coming into the areas would have to pay the king of the city-states in order to set up and sell in that city-state. They had to kind of get permission or pay a fee, just like if you have ever sold in a flea market or something, you have to pay like a down payment or some kind of deposit in order to set up in an area. So this is very similar. They had to pay a tax in order to sell in the market. And that way, the money from the taxes would go to the city-states, and so the city-states would grow in wealth that way. So again, the economy grew within the city-states because of trade, because more things were being brought in, and because of taxes. And then as the city-states became richer, more people started to move there. So people from other areas knew that they could move to these city-states and make a living where they could actually trade their items, and then they could also just survive because they could get all of the different things that they needed. So because of markets, the size and population of these city-states is going to grow as well, because more people are going to move to areas where they can get the things that they need. So just to recap, people realized they could trade with one another to get items that they needed. Markets exist wherever the trading of goods and services happens. The people in Mesopotamia created physical marketplaces to trade with one another and with people from all different regions. As trade and markets grew, city-states became richer and wealthier because of more money and items being brought in and because of taxes being paid to trade within the city-states. And then trade is also going to increase the population of these city-states because people are going to move there because they could trade their goods and get the needs met that they had in order to survive.